Ephesians chapter number 4 this morning. Ephesians chapter number 4. Going to get back to our study of the book of Ephesians. Ephesians chapter number 4. And we'll be in verses 17 and 18. So I was mentioning, of course, you know, us going to Mexico and me studying in Spanish and everything. I don't know if my notes are in English or Spanish. Oh, no. It used to be, I'm reminded of this, it used to be that way with us when we were in Mexico. We wouldn't know if we were, as we were listening to the radio, if we were listening to English or Spanish. We got to that place where we didn't know. And so I don't know right now if my notes are in English or in Spanish. And so if I start going off into another language that you don't understand, except for Betty, because I'm preaching at Betty this morning, right? And so it's all Spanish. But if I start speaking Spanish to you, kind of raise your hand like this and let me know that I've dropped. Are you having sleep jumps? The preaching hadn't started yet. Your nap is about to start and you're sleeping jumping. I do too. All right, we're in verses 17 and 18 of Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. It says this I say therefore and testify in the Lord that ye henceforth not walk as other Gentiles walk, in the vanity of their mind, having the understanding darkened, being alienated from the life of God through the ignorance that is in them, because of the blindness of their heart. And so this morning we're going to be going along with Paul as he's speaking to this Gentile church. Right? The church at Ephesus is a church filled with Gentiles. All right? And that's important for us to understand because he's telling the church of Gentiles not to think like Gentiles. So sometimes in the scriptures when Paul uses the word Gentiles here, if he's not speaking to a mixed group, the word Gentile there will often refer to the unregenerate person or the unsaved person. And so in context here, what he's saying is, you Christians don't think like an unsaved person. Right? So, henceforth walk not as other Gentiles walk or like you used to walk in the vanity, and we're going to look at that word in just a moment, of their mind, having the understanding darkened, so that means they just don't really get it. Being alienated from the life of God, and so they're not only do they not follow God, but then they're like antagonistic towards those who do. And then the reason is because of the blindness of their heart. Let's look at that word vanity for just a moment, and then we're going to see it in another passage. This word, the Greek word that's behind this word vanity, is only used 3 times in the New Testament. And of course, this is one of them. And it means, so here's the type of thinking that these people, that Paul is trying to warn these folks not to have. It's a nonsense. It's nothingness, it's emptiness, and so this idea of nonsense. Isn't there a lot of nonsense in the world? A bunch of just dumbness in the world. I mean, if you're on social media, you see it all the time. If you watch the news, you see it all the time. If you go into the grocery store, you see it all the time. If you go to Walmart, you definitely see it all the time. And it's not just what they say, it's what they wear, how they act. It's just a bunch of nonsense. And so that's that idea in that word, in this word vanity that Paul is using. Don't Don't do nonsense. Right? Do sense. Right? Nonsense is useless. And it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. And by the way, Christians, you ought to not be looking like them, thinking like them, talking like them anyways, but you ought to definitely not be full of nonsense. We need to be one, and this is from Paul to the church. You ought to be the opposite of silly, useless, nonsense. We ought to be the opposite of that. And then look at the last phrase in verse 18. It says, because of the blindness of their heart. That's why they're like that. Their heart is just blind. And in our world, aren't a lot of people ruled by their feelings? I was just reading on my news feed. There have been several incidents here in the past couple of days of road rage shootings. All right? That's nonsense. That's people getting their emotions involved. And so they're being ruled by their heart. Well, I feel like you offended me. I feel like you cut me off. The person in that car doesn't even know who you are, so it's not personal. You don't know who they are unless it's me cutting off David. That's personal, right? I'll find David's red truck, and I'll be in my old black truck, and I'll see David driving along, and I am going to cut him off, and I'm going to slam on my brakes. That's personal, okay? But somebody else that does it, they're nonsense. It's dumb. It's stupid. It's like wasting time. And so don't do that. Don't be ruled by your feelings. The blindness of their heart. How is the heart? Should you be ruled by your heart anyways? Well, I feel like that, Pastor, you're really mean all the time. I feel like you don't let me have hot pink chairs in church. I just feel like, right? I just feel like, well, let's go to Jeremiah chapter 17 and see what God says about the heart. Jeremiah chapter 17. Jeremiah chapter 17. By the way, I've had this argument going on in my own mind. So it's not really an argument. It's kind of a thought process that goes on. I got saved when I was 10. And then I got away from the Lord. And then I grew up, became, an adult. I joined the Air Force. Then my wife and I got married. And then I was stationed in Sacramento for a couple of years after that. And then we moved to Spain. And a lady witnessed to my wife, and my wife got saved. And I rededicated my life to the Lord. And I had been in Spain. And I had been in Turkey. And I had gone to Greece. And I've been to Germany. And I came back to the United States. And then from there, I went to Saudi Arabia. How many different cultures have I been in? And then the Lord calls me into full-time service, and we lived down in Mexico, which is another culture. We lived in North Carolina. That's another culture, right? I drove through Tennessee. I couldn't stop in Tennessee because that's a whacked-out culture. They don't even know how to spell holler. There's not an R in holler. But I've been in these different places. And then languages that I've learned: Spanish, American Sign Language, I went to college to learn English. How bad is English? I know Southern, right? I've studied biblical Greek. I've studied biblical Hebrew. And so here's what I'm saying is I've been around. And do you know what a nonsensical person would say? Following God is stupid. So somebody who hasn't even been out of their hometown would come up to me and say, why do we need another church in Tucson? Why do you think why follow God? He's not even real. And I'll sit there and I'll look at the person and I'm like, where have I been and what have I learned and what cultures have I been to? What things have I seen? And you think I'm dumb? And so this is where the mindset of the Gentile is at. They think that we're the ones that have lost our minds and they're so much more intelligent than we are. Well, bud, you haven't even been out of Tucson. And if you go out of Tucson, then you go to Marana. That's 45 minutes from here. And then if you're really going way out of your way, you go to Vail. So like I said, I've been having this conversation in my mind that I'm not just from here and I'm coming back here and I don't know what I'm talking about and I don't know anything about anything in the world, but a Gentile is going to come up and say, you're dumb. What is the heart like? What is the heart of that person like? Well, we see it in Jeremiah 17 and verse number 9. You should be in Jeremiah 17. Look at verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things. So what is the heart? Deceitful. Now, how many of you think that all people are basically good? How many of you think any people are basically good? What does the Bible say about the heart? Not only that, it's deceitful above all things. And so there's not anything in the world more deceitful than your heart. And then what does he go on to say? And desperately wicked. Who can know it? So some of us will say, well, people are generally good. No. What does Romans chapter 3 say in verse number 10? There is none righteous, no, not one. In verse 23 of the same chapter, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. There is none that understandeth. I mean, if you, well, let's do it. Not on my notes, this is free. Go to Romans chapter 3. The chapter is kind of brutal on that. Romans chapter 3. And we'll pick it up in verse 9. Romans chapter 3 and verse number 9. I'm just going to read a small portion of it. We're not going to go in depth and look at everything, but and let me just read it. And you tell me if people are generally good or generally not good. Right? Verse number 9 in Romans 3. What then? Are we better than they? No, in no wise. For we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are under sin. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. There is none that understandeth. There is none that seeketh after God. They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good, no, not one. Their throat is an open sepulchre. With their tongues they have used deceit. The poison of asps is under their lip. under their lips, whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Their feet are swift to shed blood. Destruction and misery are in their ways, and the way of peace have they not known. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them that are under the law, and that every mouth should be stopped, and all the world should become guilty before God. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. Verse 23, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Now, does that sound like people are generally good or generally wicked? Right? Didn't it say plainly in verse number 12, the end of that, there is none that doeth good. And if that's not enough, he says, no, not one. So again, when we look at Jeremiah 17 and verse number 9, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? No wonder the world is blind. And no wonder why we're based on feelings. And no wonder why we just don't understand the things of God, which is totally opposite. And so Christians, what Paul is trying to say to this church at Ephesus, to this Gentile church, is don't think like that. Right? So today, it's not Paul speaking, but it's Pastor John saying, church, don't think like that. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 2. Let's look at a second use of this same word, vanity. The same Greek word, vanity. Like I said, it only appears 3 times. The third time doesn't really apply in context to what we're talking about. It's on a different subject matter. 2 Peter chapter 2. That's 2 Peter, David. We had an issue yesterday, and so I'm just going to help David out. 2 Peter. 2 Peter 2. So 2 Peter 2. 2 Peter 2 and verse number 10. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 10. And we'll read down through verse number 18, and our word is in this passage, so we'll look at it. But starting in verse 10, just to get the context. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse number 10, but chiefly them that walk after the flesh in the lust of uncleanness and despise government, presumptuous are they, self-willed. They're not afraid to speak evil of dignities. Whereas angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusation against them before the Lord. But these, as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. Do you see how the Lord is describing the unsaved? Right? Natural brute beasts. When I say those words together and you just go to your imagination, what do you think of? Evil. All right, a wild animal. My mind goes to the old Looney Tune cartoons. You guys remember that? Mm-hmm. And there was one. I think it was Bugs Bunny, the Shropshire Slasher. And this guy, you know, he was hulking like this, and he had muscles sticking out everywhere, and he had this protruding lip, and he had this protruding forehead, and he was just the appearance of evil walking around. And when I think of natural brute beast, that's what I think of. Right? Kind of a caveman look in a suit. And that's how the Lord is describing. So, you know, as I'm reading down through this, let your imagination roam just a little bit and make it a little more colorful, what we're reading here. They're natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things that they understand not. So, number one, there's not a God. God doesn't exist. I'm an atheist. You might hear something like this too. Boy, this one. If God was such a loving God, why does he let so many bad things happen on earth? Well, how did God create man? He created us with a free will. Right? You can choose. That's why in the garden, God planted the tree and said, don't eat the fruit thereof. He wanted Adam to have a choice and a free will, and he had to make a choice. Now, why is there so much evil in the world? If God is such a loving God, why did he let so many bad things happen? Is it God's fault? Let me ask you this, and I've illustrated this before this way. Is there soap? Yep. Is there plenty of soap in the world? Yep. Why are there still dirty people? Because they don't apply it. They don't use the soap. Same concept. God is around and God is everywhere, but people don't apply it. And so why is there so much evil in the world and why is there so much bad in the world? It's because we don't apply God. He's there. It's not his fault. It's our fault for not choosing him. And so people will say dumb things like, he can't be real. He can't really be a loving God if he lets this kind of stuff happen. He could have stopped it. Yeah, he could have, but you chose. And it goes on. Speak evil of the things they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. Verse 13. And shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they count it pleasure to riot in the daytime. Do we see rioting in our countries? Well, if the vote doesn't go my way, I'm going to riot. If the vote does go my way, I'm going to riot. If my team doesn't win, I'm going to riot. If my team does win, then I'm going to riot. Spots they are, and blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you, having eyes full of adultery, and that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, and heart they have exercised with covetous practices, cursed children, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Bozor. By the way, that's the Old Testament. Who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumb ass speaking with man's voice forbade the madness of the prophet. Do you remember when Balaam was riding on his donkey and the donkey started speaking to him? Because the angel of the Lord was in the way and was about to kill Balaam. And the donkey could see it. And Balaam smote the donkey like 3 times, and the donkey, finally the angel loosed the mouth of the donkey, and the donkey looked at him and said, "What are you hitting me for? There's an angel right there about to kill you, and I'm protecting you." Verse 17, these are wells without water. How useful is a well without water? It's just a hole of dirt, right? It's a hole with dirt in it. Then it goes on, clouds that are carried with a tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever. It doesn't say that they rain. How useful is a cloud if it doesn't rain? It's not very useful. Verse 18, for when they speak great swelling words, and here's our word, of vanity. What did the word vanity mean? Nonsense. So great swelling words of nonsense. They allure through the lust of the flesh, through much wantonness, those that were clean escaped from them who live in error. They just speak nonsense. But look at the description of them before we even got to that word. Now, if you knew that that was the character of the person that was speaking to you, do you think that you would listen to them? Pay attention to them? That's a pretty good question, isn't it? That's their character. If they have not accepted Christ as their Savior, that's their character. And by the way, there are plenty of men and women in this position that are without Christ, and this is their character. And they will tell you lies, and they will deceive you because their heart is blind. It reminded me of in the Gospels, I think it's in Matthew, where Jesus rebukes the Pharisees, saying the blind leading the blind. And this is what Paul is warning the church at Ephesus about. And really, he's warning our church too. Don't be listening to these kind of people. Don't pay attention to them. This is their character, and you just told me that if you knew this was their character, you wouldn't listen to them. Well, this is their character. Turn with me to Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. We'll see a little bit more about their character and the way that they think. And then you tell me if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Romans chapter number 1, and we'll start in verse number 18. When I was reading both of these passages, they almost say the same thing. But Peter wrote one of them, and Paul wrote the other one. Romans chapter 1, we'll start in verse number 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. For God has showed it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. By the way, he's saying right there, you can look at creation and say there's a creator. Right? There's no way that we cannot look at the order of things and the complexity of things and just say, well, that happened. Right? Here's an old illustration. Some of you are mechanics or like cars and stuff like that. If I was to take an engine apart and throw it in my garage and leave it there for 10 billion years, would it ever become a motor? No. Why do we think that that's what happened with this? That there was a bunch of atoms laying around in the garage for billions of years, and it made this. Right? Take a watch apart and throw the watch parts on a table and leave it there. Will it ever become a watch? No. No matter how much I do to it, no matter how much I look at it, no matter how much I think about it, no matter how much water I throw on it, right? It's not ever going to grow into a watch. And so what the first part of Romans chapter 1 and verses 18, 19, and 20 are telling us are, we can look at creation and know there was a creator. Verse 21, because that when they knew God, so did they know God? Did they know there was a God? Everybody knows they start out in their lives knowing there is a God. But when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. What started the path? They were not thankful. Verse 23, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like unto corruptible man. Have you ever seen statues of Mary? Of Buddha? Of, I forget what the Indian one's name is called now. The one with all the arms? Indian. I forget what they call it. But we've taken the image of the uncorruptible God and we've made it into that. And then it goes on. And it says, so we're in verse 23, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God in the image made like unto corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God into a lie, and worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up to vile affections, for even their women did change the natural use into that which is against nature, and likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust one toward another, men with men, working that which is unseemly, and receiving in themselves that recompense of the error which was meet. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which are not convenient, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of God. By the way, that list, did that sound like a good list? No. Did that sound like a list of things you would want on your resume? No. You know what kind of person I am? I'm a covenant breaker. I'm angry. I'm malicious. I'm wicked. I'm full of envy. By the way, I'm a murderer. I like to argue all the time, debate, deceit. By the way, whatever I say is a lie. Does that sound like a good resume? That word implacable, I had to look up implacable. Do you see that? Right in verse number 31. So without natural affection, implacable. Do you see that? Any of you know what that means? It's unwilling to forgive. Unwilling to reconcile. All right, so it's more than unforgiving. It's not even willing to entertain the idea to reconcile. Verse 32, who knowing the judgment of God. By the way, do you think the world knows there's a hell?
I'm not sure they do.
Well, they do, because they say, I'm going to go to hell and party with all my friends.
They don't know what it is, though.
So they know about a hell.
They just don't know.
Or they'll say, well, hell is here on earth. Or they'll say, hell is between your ears. So it's in your mind. So they understand the concept of hell, and that hell is not good. So they know the judgment of God. And by the way, if you bring a first-time unsaved visitor into church, you know what they're afraid of? You know what their biggest fear is on coming inside of a Bible-preaching church? Do you know what their fear is? That the ceiling's going to fall down on their head. Well, if I go into church, the ceiling's going to fall on my head. I don't know how many times I heard that. I even heard it in Mexico. And by the way, I made the ceiling fall down on a first-time visitor's head. One time and I've told this before, I was doing the illustration with the one foundation and the gold, silver, precious stones and the wood, hay, stubble. Well, I put those things in a plate on the table and I lit that thing on fire. Well, I was using the dried out corn husks, right? Do you know how flammable dried out corn husks are? Right? Whoosh, it was a fireball that came up. Whoosh. Well, it lifted the ceiling tiles like this up out of the little frames there. Well, it lifted up, and it lifted up the ceiling tile right above where David was sitting, and that's where the first time visitor was sitting in the church, and the ceiling tile came down on his head. So literally, for that man, the ceiling did fall down on his head. And I caused it. I don't know if the Lord, got in on that. He said, this guy's afraid of this so much that I'm going to make it happen. We laughed about it afterwards. That's how I knew that was his fear. Because I went up to him and I apologized. I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was going to whoosh. He was chuckling and laughing. Yeah, I knew when I was coming to a church like this, the ceiling was going to fall on my head. That's what they're afraid of. They know the judgment of God, and they think it's God that's going to cause the ceiling to fall on their head as the lightning bolt is coming down through it to strike them. So they know the judgment of God. But then it goes on and says that they which commit such things, well, what things? The things we just read are worthy of death. They know that that's their end. They know the judgment of God. They know those things are worthy of death. Continue on. Not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. That right there is the definition of nonsensical. You know the judgment of God. You know the end is hell. You've heard that hell is not a good place. And yet, you cheer on those who are on their way there. Not only that, but then you join them. That's the definition of vanity. What does the Lord tell us to do? Don't think like that. Go back to Ephesians chapter 4. The Lord through Paul, what does he tell us? Look at our verses, Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18. And it says, therefore I say, this I say therefore, and testify in the Lord that you walk, or that you henceforth walk not like we just read in 2 Peter 2 and Romans chapter 1, that you not walk as other Gentiles walk in the vanity of their mind. The Lord is trying to warn us. Don't do that. Having the understanding darkened. You ought to have your understanding enlightened. And the way that we get it enlightened is to get into the Word. Right, so Paul in Ephesians chapter 4 and these verses, he's telling us how not to be. Now, in chapters 5 and 6, he's going to tell us how to be. We're going to take a little glimpse at that so we can kind of come up out of this, the heaviness of this, how the world thinks. But Christian, don't think like the world thinks. We need to get that out of our minds. If you put all this stuff on your resume and then you wanted people to listen to you about the love of Jesus Christ, you know what they're going to say to you? Yeah, you have no ground to stand on. You're in Ephesians chapter 4. Go to chapter 5, and we'll look at how we're supposed to think. And I'm just going to touch on this because, again, we're going to get to Ephesians chapter 5 and Ephesians chapter 6 on how we're supposed to be. Right? So Paul is telling us in Ephesians 4, don't think like the Gentiles think, in the vanity of their mind, in the nonsense of their mind. But in Ephesians 5 and verse 15, How are we supposed to live, or how are we supposed to walk? He says, see then that you walk circumspectly. That's thoughtfully. All right? You can see circumference in that word. Right? Put your head on a swivel. You need to have an understanding of what's going on around you. Right? Don't walk narrow with blinders on. But you need to walk fully understanding what's going on all around you. And by the way, that includes the spiritual realm. There is a heaven. There is a hell. Hell is bad. You go to Luke chapter 16, it's flames. You go to Mark chapter 9, it's flames that can't be quenched. Right? It's a place of torment. You go to heaven, you look in Revelation chapters 20, 21 and 22, and you see the description of New Jerusalem as it comes down, and that's just a little portion of heaven. City of gold, the throne of God, and there's a river of life that comes out of it, and on either side of that river are trees with 12 manner of fruit on them, and the fruit is always ready. And we get to be in the presence of Jesus Christ, and we get to be in the presence of the loved ones that have been in Christ that have gone on before us. And it's a place that we can't even describe on how wonderful it is. That's part of this walking circumspectly. Realizing there's a judgment seat of Christ. Realizing there's a great white throne judgment. We need to walk with that understanding. So how does the Lord, through Paul, tell us how to live? We need to walk with all of that in our minds. And then he continues on, not as fools, not like the world, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. You know what the will of the Lord is? For you to be in your word, in the Bible, for you to pray, for you to be in church. I mean, that's only 3 that I've listed of the 127 commands that he gives to believers. That's only 3, and how hard is it for us to do those 3? Right? And so Paul is trying to tell us how to live and how to be not as fools or not as Gentiles. All right, we need to understand that the Lord is there, all the different aspects of the Lord. And we need to get into the Word and understanding what His will is, getting into His Word and praying and being in church and giving and loving and serving. All of those things. And so again, Paul is just exhorting us and through the church at Ephesus how to think and not think. And I would encourage you not to think like Gentiles. Think like children of God. That is not vanity. That is the opposite of vanity. All right, let's stand to our feet with our heads bowed and eyes closed.